Hey everybody, how are you guys doing? This lecture will be for Tuesday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. So happy Cinco de Mayo to all of you. Um, I hope all of you are doing well or as well as possible in your last week of senior year for classes. I hope to see all of you on Friday at the senior drive-through, as I know just about everybody in the social studies department will be there to cheer you guys on and to wish you well. So we have two more of these to go. Tuesday and Wednesday, we will wrap up the social psych unit, and then we will take our test on Thursday, which is your last grade. Everything on Infinite Campus has been updated, so take a look and see if there's anything that you owe. Please remember, I'm not looking to take points off for something being late. I just, need the work so I can get my grades in and get you guys on your way. So today we're going to talk about self-fulfilling prophecy, prejudice, discrimination, ethnocentrism, scapegoating, things like that. Okay, so we've heard of a lot of these theories, if you will, or principles of psychology. But the question is where are they in the brain? Why are some people seem to be more prejudiced and discriminatory than others? Is it genetics? Of course. Is it our environment? Of course. What shapes it? What's the motivational factors behind it? All right. So we're trying to put it into context and understand it. I think we would all agree that prejudice and discrimination, they are deeply rooted in human nature. They have been present since human beings have been in close quarters in civilized society. The question is why does one group go against another group? Why do certain people act out on their prejudices and other people keep it to themselves? What are the societal, benefits, if there are any, or mostly detriments, which we certainly could, list a long list a lot of events and decades that there have been problems where minority groups have been precluded from the same benefits as majority of society. Okay, now self-fulfilling prophecy, we can look at that in the individual way and the group way. So in the individual way, your beliefs reinforce your actions, and when your actions produce the result that matches to your beliefs, it reinforces that belief. Okay, it's sort of like the "I told you so" moment. So we all make these claims about anything, about the score of a game or a stock, or I'll get into that school, or I told you, he would break up with her, or whatever it is. And when most of them or many of those claims never really ring out to be true, but when they do, we pat ourselves on the back and we say, "See, I told you so." Okay, so it's that self-fulfilling prophecy where the prophet can see into the future. And once it happens, it reinforces the fact that you will continue to do this. Now, where this is in the group dynamic is this here occurs when one person's belief about others leads one to act in ways that induce the other to appear to confirm that belief. So along the lines of prejudice and discrimination, if we make a prejudicial claim that this group of people will do this or say this or act like this, we will then be looking and seeking for them to do it so that we can then say, "See, I told you," that's what that group is like. Okay? Let's move on to actual definitions of prejudice and discrimination. So you see the word judge in prejudice. Again, we all do these things. They are oftentimes that system one, that knee-jerk, that impulsive reaction. Now, they are there to help us survive, okay? Because they can alert us to fearful situations. Now, as the world has become a safer place, the knee-jerk prejudice or discriminatory behaviors have become more of a problem because we are protected by rules of law and the courts and the police. We don't always have to fear those people who are different than us. But, back on the plains of savannah when, human beings were hunters and gatherers and running around, prejudice helped serve, well, I'm different than that, and that is a danger to me. So we understand why it's rooted in a survival instinct, but it definitely has changed over the millions of years, or the tens of thousands of years, if you will, to be more manageable today. So judgments about people can be both positive and negative, but prejudice is always a negative judgment. All right, if we have a positive judgment about somebody, it's good. We have a negative judgment about somebody, it could be good, it could also be very bad. All right, so Prejudice is we're prejudging, right? Before we know, we're coming up with an idea or a belief or a conclusion about an event or a person that may or may not be true. So prejudice is having negative thoughts, emotions, attitudes, or feelings towards an individual solely based on his membership in a particular group, okay? So if you know a person with brown hair that's very, very mean, all right, and you then apply it to everybody with brown hair is mean, you're missing the boat because there are a lot of people with brown hair who happen to be very, very lovely, okay? So this can lead to the self-fulfilling prophecy because if you believe that all people with brown hair are mean, then you're going to go out to look for brown-haired people that are mean while missing, first of all, other brown-haired people that are not mean. You're discarding them. And then really looking at the behavior of other people with different colored hair, okay? Because perhaps the truth is more that blonde people tend to be mean. And you would completely miss that because for whatever reason, you came up with this prejudicial notion that people with brown hair are mean. All right. Now, Rosenthal and Jacobson did a famous experiment called the Pygmalion in the classroom. So Rosenthal was a Harvard social psychologist and Jacobson was an elementary school principal. And they got together and they did an experiment where they told teachers in the building, in her building, that 5 students picked randomly would fall behind, that they would not perform as well as the other students in the class. And what they were trying to see is how would this affect, but by changing the expectations of what the teacher thought about those 5 students, how might this change their outcomes? And what they realized at the end of the school year was that the students that they had told the teacher would actually fall behind did better than most of the other students in the class because it lowered the expectations of the teacher of them, so the teacher worked harder for them. They put more time and attention into those students, and they actually helped to raise them up. So where this fits in with prejudice is that we have expectations of the people that we are, or the groups that we are prejudiced against, or the ideas that we are prejudiced against. And then how does that shape how we actually try to form what actually occurs? Okay, so where prejudice is an attitude, discrimination is the action. So prejudice is the belief, the idea, the attitude. Discrimination is the actual behavior or the action that is taken against a person because of his membership in a group. So if we are looking at brown-haired people, if I'm prejudiced against brown-haired people because I believe that they are mean, all right, that is prejudice. Now, that's not hurting anybody. I mean, I could hurt people by opening my mouth and saying that, but if I believed it, I don't necessarily have to say it. But once I act against the brown-haired person and I hurt them, throw something at them, restrict them in some way, that is now the action that is discrimination. So prejudice, remember, is the idea or belief, and discrimination is the action or behavior. All right. Now, what causes discrimination? We break it down into 5 different categories: dissimilarity and social distance. Okay. So we're going to see this theme. The more I'm like somebody, the more I trust them. The more I'm not like somebody, the less I trust them. And again, this is part of our natural instinct. We fear the thing. Our eyes tell our brain this is different, and our brain perceives it as, well, is this a threat? That's basic survival evolutionary psychology, all right? Social distance is another thing. The closer I am to people, the more I understand them, okay? So the further away I am from somebody, the less I understand them. So social distancing, or not social distancing, sorry, COVID-19, brain fart there. But social distance definitely has something to do. It's usually culturally based. So if we live in a part of town that only has one kind of person and we think that the people that live in the other part of town are blank, okay, the distance between us, it never kind of lets us get over that discrimination because we're not near them. We're not getting used to them. All right, economic competition, and we've seen this in America from the very, very beginning. When one group wins economic benefits at the expense of another group. So the example here, I mean, look at the immigrant groups in our nation's history. Right? You had English and Scottish really come and settle this country. When the Irish, who were their neighbors in Europe, got off the boats, they absolutely hated them. All right. And then the Germans got off the boats 10 or 20 years after that. They absolutely hated them. And then when the Italians and the Jews and the Russians and the Poles got off the boats in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, by then the English and the Scottish and the Dutch had largely taken the Irish and the Germans into their group. And now it was, okay, this is America. Now we dislike the Italians and the Jews and the Poles and the Russians because they're different. Okay. And then when all of those groups established themselves and got better, and then the Puerto Ricans and the Dominicans started coming in the 1940s and 1950s, it became, well, we're the Americans, these are the newcomers, and we're going to discriminate against them. Now, what underlies all of this? Immigrants that come to the country were always more vulnerable and willing to work for less money. So they were a direct economic threat to those at the lower, wage or lower working class people because they were starting to move up and make things better. And if another group came in that would be willing to work for less, then that would hurt them. Scapegoating. This is placing blame on other groups. All right. And obviously the most prevalent example of this would be the Jews blaming, the Nazis blaming the Jews for all of the problems in Germany. Now, listen, the Jewish people have always been fiercely private, fiercely communal in the sense that they don't trust outside groups, probably because of the thousands of years of persecution that they went through all the way back into the Old Testament times, okay, when they were being expelled from various places in, I think it was Egypt or somewhere in the Middle East, all right? They have not been favored in many societies or ever been the majority, besides Israel, of any society. And that's why Israel is so important to them, so that they're not a minority there and that they can actually have a place where they are safe, okay? Now, conformity to social norms, an unthinking tendency to keep things the way they are, even if they may be wrong. So discrimination or prejudice is kept in place by those who don't think that things should change. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's working, and if I'm doing fine, and I'm prejudiced, then I'm going to continue to be prejudiced because I want to keep things exactly the same way they are. Things are good for me. All right. And then media stereotypes. All right. Images, words, or ideas used to project groups in a certain overgeneralized way. Music does it. TV does it. The movies do it. Books do it. All right. And then it gets into our brains, and then we believe that that's the way the world actually is. When we overgeneralize, okay, we take the emphasis off the individual and we put it on the group. All right. And, all people in a group, it's very difficult to say that group is this. As a whole, maybe yes, but as individuals, they might be very, very different. All right. So we're losing that individuality, and we're just saying in very broad general terms what a group might be. That can definitely lead to discrimination and stereotyping and prejudice. So stereotypes, we all know the definition of this word. All right. A generalized, sometimes accurate, but often overgeneralized. There's that word again, belief about a group of people. Are stereotypes true? Sure. Are stereotypes often very, very blatantly missing the point and missing what the truth of the matter is? Absolutely. Okay. Stereotype threat. Stereotyped groups are made anxious of any situation where their behavior might confirm a stereotype. So this has a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of tinge to it, where the group feels fearful or anxious that because people want the stereotyping to be true, that only that behavior that enforces the stereotype will actually be made to be valid and talked about and put out there in front of other people. All right, we all do this. We all make jokes about it. I mean, geez, I've heard people in the groups that are being made fun of stereotyping themselves and talking about it. And listen, we've all been a product of this based on our differences, whether it be if tall people are this, short people are this, fat people are this, skinny people are that, men are this, women are that, young people are this, old people are that, teachers are this, doctors are that. I mean, you can find this sort of stereotyping because if you think about it, it lets us perceive the world much quicker, paint people and situations into boxes without really getting into it. But, when you do this on a mass scale, it can cause serious problems and serious, detriments to people's rights, to their economic well-being, to their safety, to their happiness. All right. And that's what all of this is. It's these quick, overgeneralized, knee-jerk, snap judgments that, yes, help us detect threats, and yes, help us organize things more neatly in the world quicker. But again, when added together, if you're not that majority group, when it comes to politics and democracy and republicanism, okay, it can become a major problem for groups that don't have the power in numbers. Now, contact theory or intergroup contact. So Gordon Allport is going to do a study and comes up with the idea that contact hypothesis refers to the belief that prejudices can be lessened or eliminated by direct contact between groups. And we see this, right? St. Anthony's High School, and I hate to say this, but if I go into the cafeteria, okay, I will see a table of all white students. I may see a table of all black students, all right? And that may happen for, every period of the day for one reason or another. We're not going to get into all of that right now. But then after school, I go to football practice, and I have white kids and black kids on the team, and they're hugging, handshaking, throwing the ball to each other, working together, listening to the coaches, trying to share a common goal, all right? So, and we're going to talk about this in a minute with sports, with superordinate goals. It ties into that as well. But, they share that bond, that closeness of the goals of the football team. All right. And that reduces whatever prejudice or discrimination there might actually be. So if two kids of different race or different background are on a team or in a group together and they're successful together, then the next thing you know, come to my house. Let's go to the movies together. Let's do something together. And then the more time that's spent together, the less there's the realization that you're not so different after all. Because if you really think about it, every single human being needs the same things. We're all different, yes, but we all need the same basic things, and we're all basically similar, okay? So if you think of it that way, and you just look at the broad strokes that, hey, we're all alive, we all want to be happy, we all want to be successful, we all want to have a purpose, we all understand that we're going to die one day, then what's really so different that we might pray to a different God, or we might eat a different food, or we might speak a different language, or have a different skin color? What is the difference? We all bleed red, right? We're all going to the same place. Now, in the modern world, there are many organizations that exist to create forums for different religions and ethnic groups to learn about each other and discuss their differences. If you've had me for U.S. history, you have always heard me say, when we're talking to each other, we're not killing each other. When we're making money with each other, we're not killing each other, okay? Because when we're talking to each other, we're learning about each other, and we're learning that, hey, we're not so different after all. An example of that would be the United Nations, created after the Second World War, all right? And since the Second World War, and there's many other reasons for this, but since the Second World War, there has not been a World War III. Now, we could argue about the UN and whether it is effective or not, but it is a fact that when these countries, there's a forum for them to air their grievances, not to fire a weapon or a nuke at the other country, but first, let's try diplomacy. Let's try talking to each other first. Now, ethnocentrism is the belief that your society, group, or culture is superior to all others. This means that differences in groups, your group has more old people than ours, are seen as somehow bad. So this is where we break it up by country or nationality or a culture, all right, rather than just an individual or rather than a skin color, okay? Africans, Muslims, Americans, Jews, all of that could be examples of ethnocentric behavior. Now, is our culture important? Absolutely. But I think what America has proven is that a very, very diverse place can turn into the wealthiest and most successful place that the world has ever known. And that is what America has been. It has been a nation of immigrants from the very beginning. And because of the diversity of opinion, and yes, we've had some racial problems in this country, but for the most part, all right, the talent out of the groups, the different groups and the opinions that they bring have been, somewhat utilized. That has helped push things further upward and better, and over time have made us all more prosperous and our futures brighter as a result. So look at the social relations here. So Americans today express much less racial and gender prejudice than they did. So this is a graph from 1936 up until about 2000. So would you vote for a woman president? You see that kind of grow and then flatline, and then you see it really, really start to go up as well. And I'm assuming, the fact that the last female that ran for president actually got more votes than the person that won the presidency, who was a man, I would imagine that means that at some point in the future we will be getting a female president, since one already got more votes in a general election than the other. So again, it's an assumption, but with the right candidate and the right social conditions and the right economy, I would imagine that before long, definitely in my lifetime and yours, we're going to see a female president. The other question here represented on the graph is, do whites have a right to keep minorities out of their neighborhoods? So you see this dip as we get into the late 1960s there, which was the time of MLK and Malcolm X, and then it spiked there in the in the late 70s real quick, and then it goes down, and it's been on a downward trajectory ever since. So I would imagine that most people, and I live in Smithtown, right? It's a mostly white neighborhood. I really could care less who moves onto my block or in my neighborhood. And since we've moved in here, I have seen black families move in. I've seen Asian families move in. I've seen Indian families move in. And I could really care less that they look like me or eat like me or think like me. I just have to assume that if they can afford what I can afford, that they have similar values to me, because that means they probably hold the same kind of jobs as I do and my wife does, and that means that we're not so different after all, okay? So, this is all positive, and the trajectory of this is definitely going in the right direction. Now, social relations, so the in-group is us, the out-group is them, all right? So the us is the people with whom we share a common identity with. So I like to say that America is the in-group, not white Americans, male Americans, black Americans, Italian Americans, but Americans. That's the in-group. That's us, all right? The out-group is them, those perceived as different or apart from one's in-group. So the out-group, if you want to look at it in that, us is America, them is the rest of the world. But if we want to go one step further and get rid of all out-groups, the in-group, us, is human beings, all right? Human beings, which is everybody, is the in-group. And I don't know what the out-group becomes then. The out-group, I guess, becomes aliens or I don't know, something else. So if I think if people in America had more of the perspective that it's us, America, as one, we wouldn't have so much division inside the country. And as a world, if we all, I think, realize that it's not about Muslims and Christians and Americans and Iranians, it's all human beings, then we might all see each other as more valuable, and our actions and the fear that we not only feel, but we also help to spread, and we also help to seize power off of, might actually not be as central to a role as the way events play out. Now, just world phenomenon. The tendency of people to believe the world is just. People get what they deserve and deserve what they get. Now, I don't know what history books these people would be reading, but the world is certainly not just. I mean, there's karma, there's balance, but justice is not just out there. Sometimes justice has to be fought for. Sometimes justice has to be legislated by governments. It doesn't just work that way, that the world is just. The powerful have been hurting the weak since the very, very beginning. And that is part of human nature as well. Justice is that somebody sticks up for the weak in stopping the powerful from hurting them. Okay? So until we have that across the board for everybody, and you never will, all right, this just world phenomenon, at least in my opinion, doesn't work. Now, do people think this way? Absolutely. All right. It's sort of like the social Darwinism that you learned about in the U.S. history as 11th graders, right? So the slave owners owned the slaves because that's the way God intended it. That's just the way the world was, the just world phenomenon. Don't try to fight it. All right. White people were human and black people were subhuman. So, and it's no one's fault. All right. That's just the way God made it. So you can't fight with God. And then if you think about social Darwinism in the decades of the capitalism and the Gilded Age of the 1880s and the Rockefellers and the Morgans, when very, very small segment of society was getting wildly rich while 60%, 70% of society was really, really working poor. And they said, well, the government can't come in and do anything about it because we're just that much better. This is the way the world works. This is how God intended it. And people get what they deserve and deserve what they get. So we deserve to get rich because we created a product or figured out a way to buy up an industry. And they deserve what they get because they didn't do that. And now they're going to work for me at pennies on the dollar. Now, can we change this? Yes, through education. The more knowledge we have of groups and the differences between them, and why do you think that you study in global and in U.S. all the different cultures? all the different groups. So you can build some sort of respect, all the different religions. So you can build some sort of respect and admiration for cultures that are different than you, so that when you do come across them later in your life, they won't be so foreign to you, all right? Because you will have understood something about their culture, and then you'll be able to compare it to something about your own culture that is similar. So equal status contact between groups in which the groups have equal status, with neither group having power over the other. Okay, similar idea as the contact theory, that the closer we are to each other and the more we don't place ourselves above the other group, the better off we're going to be when it comes to racism and prejudice and discrimination. All right, and last but not least, superordinate goals, shared goals that override the differences among people and require their cooperation. All right, so if 5 people are in the woods who dislike each other completely, but they have to survive, they're going to put aside those differences because survival is now the number one goal of that group. What does it matter if you're a different religion or a different skin color or one has more money than the other if you're all going to die together? All right, we see it in sports. We see it in really all sorts of group dynamics where the goal of the group is more important than the differences or even the goals of the individuals. Okay, and I see this play out all the time where 2 kids that might not even hang out or really like each other will, for the sake of the team, put those individual differences aside and try to act in some sort of common way to benefit everybody else around them. It's selfless being, and what happens is their brain changes over time, their heart changes over time, and they start to understand that they're not so different after all. And if I value that the goal of the team is to win, and this person that's very different than me, if they value that same goal, then what else do we have in common with each other? It starts to beg that question where we're more interested and we would start to get to know that person a little bit better and realize that, again, what divides us is so much smaller than what actually unites us. Okay, so thank you. I hope you're all doing well. I will throw this up on Edpuzzle and Google Classroom. Email me with any questions that you have. Please check Infinite Campus to check on your grades. You may have gotten a few of you may have gotten an email from me, and I will speak to you all very soon. Thank you.